All right, hi everyone, and welcome to a special Catchpoint webinar presentation. Joining us today is Malik Hakim, a performance engineer at Priceline, who will be showing you how Priceline has instituted and scaled a culture of performance throughout the organization. Following the formal presentation, we'll open the floor for questions. So if you have any during the course of the webinar, simply type it into your BrightTalk questions window, and we'll cover it in the Q&A portion at the end. So with that, I will now hand things over to Malik.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Malik. As Craig mentioned, I'm a performance engineer here at Priceline. Actually, I live in New York. So for you who are here for this talk, this is not a very technical talk. It's mostly about culture and how we try to scale our culture of performance. We have a large technical organization with a bunch of engineering teams. But for you who doesn't know what Priceline is, we're actually a travel website, and we've been here since 1997. We offer various travel products like rental cars, hotels, and airlines. One quick highlight about this year, we actually saved people $1 billion in travel, so this is a great deal for us. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about performance. I assume that if you are here in this talk, you really care about performance and performance engineering. Performance is one of the big areas in engineering, and it actually has a huge impact on business, especially if you are an e-commerce company nowadays. There's a couple of studies that have been done before, like at Google, just an increase of a couple of milliseconds in load time, increased search performance. Amazon did some other studies as well. But I'm not going to be touching too much on that, as I mentioned. There's a great website for that, maintained by some great people. It's called WP Stats, where you can go and find the various studies about performance and the impact on business. Also, just touch on performance and its great importance on UX. Actually, performance, there's some studies that have been done, and it's actually ranks #1 in terms of UX hierarchy. People, as you may see in the slide, they find more. It's actually affecting websites. How attractive the website is actually not as important as how fast it loads. So let's get to culture. And if you are a pretty technical person and wondering how you initiate a culture at your organization, sometimes culture can be tricky because it's a very abstract concept, right? It could be a little bit invisible. You really don't know how to kind of approach it. I try to kind of break that down, and I don't think it is invisible. So I really take the example of someone who joined a company and really want to know if your organization actually cares about performance or not. And I think you can see it in these different parts. One of them is communication. You really can sense if people talk actually about performance while you build your organization, and if actually there is metrics that people use to evaluate the site speed. Is there any tools? Do you use Catchpoint, for example? Do you use some other tools that are out there? And is it part of your workflow, right? Is it whenever you build features, as a product engineer, for example, if you're using any of these tools and metrics and things like that, and you're trying to kind of optimize. So why cultural performance matters, right? One great thing, I think, performance is a process. A lot of e-commerce companies, sometimes, especially during rush times, maybe like a Black Friday or anything like that, you'll probably hire some consultants and try to improve the site speed. But really, performance should be part of your entire process on your everyday work. And the reason behind that, because mostly your site is changing constantly. You're always shipping products, you're always shipping new features, you're always making changes, and you always need to be mindful of that work. If you really don't do that and always think about that for a long time, you're probably going to miss, you will probably put yourself on the foot maybe when you try to make the optimization happen later on. Also, one other thing, there's great studies by Akamai, and it showed that actually people, mobile users are increasing more and more. So, and that require better focus on performance, especially if you want your website to be performing for all your users. There's a lot of fragmentation in the technologies that the users use nowadays, and you probably don't test that right now. Whenever you build products, you probably have a couple of other websites, or probably use some tools out there to test performance, but you probably don't test most of like what your users are experiencing. So you really need to be mindful of that. Another way I look at it is because performance actually sets quality standards, and the reason behind that, because performance is about quality. It's about great user experience. You know, fast websites, users perceive a slow website as a low quality website, right? And just setting that as a quality standard in the beginning, again, like if you're still joining a company, you probably think about that from the beginning, and you probably do a better work in the future. And another part about performance, why performance culture matters, because I think it drives innovation. Large organizations that actually doing a lot of innovations most of the time, you know, care about performance, and it's part of their workflow. And a great example of that, I think, is image optimizations, for example. I think we went from images to videos, and now the premise of VR, and the reason behind that, because we keep optimizing, and that kind of creates new opportunities for us. So how is cultural performance at Priceline? I think it went from I think the change is a journey. We try to kind of change this. You know, a lot of engineers we had actually cared about performance, but a lot of the times, because you're busy with all the things you're shipping, features or creating experiments and things like that, that is not being prioritized. And you always say, okay, yeah, I can make this faster, but it probably never gets done, or probably gets done after a couple of weeks or months. So in the process of trying to change this culture a little bit, we're trying to make people to be able to make the website faster, have the right tool, they're empowered, they have the right, they know how to make it fast and how to improve the website. So this is how I kind of look at the web performance cycle. It's probably obvious, but usually there's a regression and there's an improvement, right? And here I'm showing a graph that I have from one of the metrics, custom metrics we have for Visual Complete. I believe this graph is coming from Catchpoint again. But usually, you know, if you look at the trend, you always have that graph shows maybe there's some upgrade that you rolled up and you deploy. Sometimes it actually introduced some regression, and some team, you know, came in and actually tried to improve it. Later on, you had a new feature, you know, you had a regression, then you go improve again. And then maybe you decide to do some cleanup and you actually try to improve performance. But really what a great culture is try to reduce these cycles that keeps repeated again and again and again. If you have a great culture performance, you know, this cycle gets closed very quickly, and you're able to always have a good quality in a performance website. So the way we approached it, I have this slide here in three different axes, right? We try to kind of align the organization around a great culture, you know, try to get buy-in from leadership, try to get support from the teams, their managers, try to actually improve our measurement infrastructure, try to have better visibility. Nowadays, websites are getting very complex. You have a lot of services, you have different teams, and that could be a challenge to not have have some eyes on like what's going on in every corner of your website. And then I'm going to touch on the technical approach that we took here. So first, with the organizational alignment, this is always an issue I think a lot of organizations have. One of the things that we're investing a lot of times right now is to actually move our orchestration deployment orchestration platform to Kubernetes. And there's one study that I found out by Heptio. It's actually one of the challenges that organizations face is to be able to find alignments in order to change to new technologies. It's always hard, and I can understand that, right? Like in an era of microservices, all teams are being autonomous, and it's so easy for them to get silos, right? Like we have the hotel services team that actually do their own things, and they do their own stuff. They have their own technologies, and they have your AV platform team that do their own things too. And sometimes it gets hard to kind of find everyone aligned on that. So, so I think as your role as a person that would like to change the culture at your organization is to go out there and find allies. And I have a great anecdote here. Is like the team that I'm working on right now. My manager, before I become a performance engineer at Priceline, I was doing some work and he was doing some work around performance, but we were not able to know each other. We actually met each other at an event separately from the organization. We were at the web performance meetup, and and we met at that meetup, and we discovered that we work on the same company. And since then, we decided to kind of build up more of a team that cares about performance and try to find, other people in the company that care about the same thing and try to change. So really, you're out there to start a movement. And I have this funny slide here. I don't know if you watched, there's a TED Talk by Derek Sivers about how to start a movement. And you're really out there to do that. So probably start by yourself, and there's this guy who's like dancing on the park, I think in San Francisco, start dancing. Some other person who followed him up, and then the entire park starts to join the party and have a dance together. So you're really trying to do that, and I really see that's how I believe, in the year or year and a half I've been doing the work, and that's how it kind of started, right? Like you have these people who are doing their own work separately, and now we're kind of aligned. And so we're really trying to solve alignments here by trying to build tribes and guilds. And there is a great model that it's called the Spotify Squad model that actually we use at Priceline, where we try to kind of build up some communities around technologies or around common themes. You see here in this slide, there's this concept of, your columns are different teams. So probably this is like your AV platform team, or like UX team, or front end or back end, whatever. And you're trying to build these chapters and guilds that are around the common topic. So we decided to go and create this performance ambassador group that groups different peoples represented from different teams, back-end, front-end, infrastructure, and we just sit together on a bi-weekly basis. In the beginning, we just discuss topics about how we can improve performance, or like if we measure in this really well or not, and if we have any visibility on like some services that are probably critical for the functioning of the website. So that's great. Started doing this for about a year now, and we actually touch right now on various topics, and it's been great because it kind of built up this movement across the entire company. So here the goal is like to actually make performance contagious. Really, that's your work if you really want to make a change. I have another case study. Maybe again about maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, since we tried to kind of consolidate our internal component library, and it started kind of like as an organic movement where front-end engineers decide to go and build up internal components, and we decide to build a design system where all teams can share the same components. And this helped us in a lot of ways. Actually make the site more consistent, get more alignment actually outside the technology organization with the design team, and reduce the effort of rebuilding things again and again and again. And teams just came in together, agreed on a common API and on a common workflow and built up the service. But the great thing is that was one of the few initiatives that actually brought the silo team together to build on something common, right? That got kind of built on a community. And as I mentioned, a community actually built up some certain expertise. And that expertise will lead you to do better optimizations, right? I have this slide how the bundle size, evolves. So we put some instrumentation around it, and we kind of measure how the bundle size would change for that specific library. And people just have ideas now and just go and optimize it, right? And you sense people care about that right now, versus just have one engineer who just do the optimization, and maybe one day he will leave the company and now no one knows how to do it, right? And you fall back into the regression cycle. So really, people can optimize only what they understand well. So you tell me, what about business? You have some alignment in the tech organization. As I mentioned, there's a lot of studies out there that actually touch on the business impact. You could, probably in any industry you want, if you go to WP Stats, you probably find a similar company that actually did some kind of performance work, and it actually showed some great results. But also, one of the great things to do is, again, it's getting much easier to use tooling out there that you can use to do benchmarks, right? One of the things is Catchpoint, if you already use Catchpoint, but there's a lot of other synthetic tools out there like WebPitch Test or Lighthouse you could use to do benchmarks across your industry and see competitors. So one of the things we decided to do at first is to kind of go, and we have the quarterly business review, and go to actually the leadership teams and actually show how we're performing across the industry. And actually that worked really well, because now the leadership are more mindful about where we are and how we can go and improve. And I'm not showing the logos here, but really if you have a chance, just make them as big as you can if they're performing better than you. And trust me, that will work. Another part I want to touch on is performance is not a feature. I've heard that a lot across the engineering community, especially in the web performance space, that performance is a feature. I don't believe so. So performance should be part of your software DNA. It should be part of your DNA of your engineering. But really, for maybe non-technical people, if you want to just sell it as a feature. And we actually saw some great wins from that. Right now, performance tickets are being considered as any feature request or anything like that, even though, because it could be a little bit abstract, it's very hard to understand, but once you start measuring it, even though it's not a visual change, but has a real impact on the business, it will lead to great wins. I just shown it on the organizational alignment, but how did you approach this from a measurement perspective? So a couple of years ago, we invested a lot into a culture of experimentation, and I think we were lucky enough because it helped us a lot to build up this platform that we could build this culture of performance on top of. Performance can be a little bit tricky sometimes because it's very statistics based. Sometimes it's very hard to understand what it is, and having a culture of experimentation where you are actually a data-driven company would help a lot there. So that's one point that I want to touch there. But also, you're really out there, you want to look at the right metric that works with you. In the industry right now, there's a lot of metrics out there, and it's actually sometimes you shouldn't just pick the metrics that are out there and just apply them to your product. You really want to go. And I understand that it's a little bit tedious. We've been through that exercise a little bit. This is a slide where I'm showing different metrics out there that I picked from different slides given by talks in the web performance space. And there are a lot out there. And not only in the web performance space, also in the backend performance. You go and you look at something like Stackdriver, for example, which is a monitoring tool in the Google Cloud, and they offer like 900 built-in metrics. It can be a little bit crazy to sort through it, but you can just pick the ones that you recognize at first and get started measuring that. But you should probably not fall into the case where you focus on one metric. Especially, I've seen this comment where sometimes performance comes from top-down. Executives, usually look for one metric they wanna measure, but really, you need to make the case that performance is actually a story because it actually correlates with user experience. It's a journey, right? It cannot just be just a score that you could just apply on your website and say, okay, I have this score and I'm performing. Probably you have a great score on that, but your website is probably not offering a great user experience. So the way we did it, for sorting out through these metrics, we decided to, and this was an effort in the Performance Ambassador group, we decided to agree on these 5 core metrics that actually represent the journey of a loading of a page at Priceline. And these are very high level overview metrics that will be consumed by product teams and engineering teams. So I can break them down very quickly. We picked the choose time to first byte because this represents kind of service time, and it shows how close we are to our users in terms of our infrastructure. First paint and time to interactive because it shows visual. It's a visual metric and interactive metrics, and it shows we call it first impression metrics. That shows the first impression you give into the user. And visually complete and time to interactive or consistent interactive, which means okay, the page is already finished loading, and now we can the user is able to interact with it and use it. So these are metrics. We use that as kind of a spec, and went out there and looked for tools to actually support these metrics. But the goal here is to define this common language that everyone understands, all right? And using these metrics, you could go and put performance budgets and make optimizations later on. We also encourage teams to use custom metrics. One example here is time to search form visible, which is a metric that the homepage team can use because that's what they care about, right? That experience is when the search page is visible or maybe when it's interactive. And for that you can use user time and APIs on the browser to be more granular and more specific about what you're trying to use to measure. I want to touch on not only loading is important when the page is loaded. Actually, the actual experience is important here. We try to actually measure, how much time it takes for an interaction to happen, and there's some great studies about that shows, you really want to offer an experience below 100 milliseconds if you can. That feels instantaneous. So, this is probably the only technical slide that I'm showing code here, but one way to do it, and I pulled this from the Google developers website, where you can just go and measure for a specific event, how much the lag it took, right? There's some other metric out there, it's called first input delay, that actually shows the first interaction on the screen. So if you're using a ROM solution or anything like that, you could use that, to actually customize your login, have more insights about what's going on your app. Should you use ROM or synthetic? I think probably the answer is you should probably use both. For anyone who don't know what's ROM, it's actually a solution or a script that you can use to gather a real user measurement about the experiences you're offering. it's right now called field metrics. You could use it using the browser APIs and actually, send that data to a beacon and go and do some analysis around it. But also, you want to use synthetic measurements too, and that gives you a better, maybe cleaner data because you're doing the testing on a more controlled environment. So I'm comparing this. I'm just gonna go through this very quickly. Really, if you want to set up some alerting, probably you want to do that in synthetic metrics, but you could do some performance budgeting on ROM, but it's usually nosy. If you want to see all that fragmentation of your users, you want to use ROM because you could get a great insight of what's going on. And you could use synthetic if you know that your users are using a specific kind of user agent. And also with ROM, you can have better visibility of your page. So right now, we mostly use ROM to do benchmark internally. So because we own the data, we use it to compare like similar pages, let's say hotel listings with like flights or things like that. And we use synthetics to benchmark externally, like to do competitor benchmarks and things like that. Yeah. So another way we saw some great interest and helped us a lot to close out this cycle of regressions is to actually add notable events in the metrics that we are measuring. Showing here slides that shows actually the 5 different metrics that we're having on in terms of ROM measurement, and we actually add notable events that shows like if there is a change on the website, if there is a deploy that happened, or an A/B test that got turned on, and how it's affecting the website. Still, I really think that it's still very challenging to get the most accurate data, just because different tools provide different ways of measuring the metric itself. I'm just going to go through this very quickly, but this is like how you want to measure, for example, first interactive, using different synthetic and ROM tools, and how they are actually perceived. I think in context they explain the same thing, but you really want to be mindful of the tool that you use and understand how is it affecting your users. Same thing for consistently interactive. You can go from dumb interactive using the navigation timing on your browser, but also you can go very to more sophisticated metrics using Lighthouse or web page test to do some estimations of like how interactive your page is. You always need to know that your website, so that's actually one of the downfalls of synthetic, right? Your website is always providing different experiences, and using ROM, you'll be able to see that if you distribute your performance data. So how would you approach this? Right now, we've talked to you. You measure, you have better visibility. Everyone kind of care about performance and want to do the work. How do we do the work? I would say always need to start small, right? Start with low-hanging fruits. There's a lot of low-hanging fruits out there that you can use. There's a lot of resources and a lot of blog posts that you can go through. There's a lot of books. So start with stuff that you, as a person or 2 people in the company, you can make a change. And that would not require a lot of effort, and it would be quick to do. You could just do that, but try to actually use that and show the impact of that. So here I'm kind of breaking that down into different levels. You have low-hanging fruits, then you have advanced techniques. Usually the advanced techniques, the way I see it, is like, and probably every technology you use, like any programming language or any framework or any infrastructure tool, always have some advanced section in their documentation, and that's like where you can go and do like more granular things. And then once you have more buy-in in the company, you can go and think about architectural changes to actually affect your performance. One quick example of like how we got started, actually, and we got a great feedback from leadership and product and marketing, is we noticed that while we did the redesign, we created we swapped our logo on the website, and it's actually forgot to optimize it because we were not having the right workflow there to do the optimization for the SVG. And we noticed that, and we went and actually tried to experiment, trying to optimize our logo. And even though it was a very easy change, and it was just a couple of kilobytes here, around 10 kilobytes, because of our scale, it improved the rendering performance, especially in here, render star or first paint, push the entire rendering on the screen. Earlier, it affected all pages, but also affected, bookings by a lot. It was actually a lot of hundreds of bookings a day. This change was, I think, the inflection point, I would say, that made product teams to be interested now to do more and more advanced performance testings and experiments. So I am highlighting a couple of other low-hanging fruits. You could start by just reduce your JS bundle size. Especially if you never looked at that, just go and clean up your code, remove all the old libraries that you don't use. You will see great change for that. Try to reorganize your critical path loading. If you need an API response that needs to be called early, you could just move down the code to be called early, and you will see the change. Turn on optimizations flag, if you use, especially on the DevOps, the infrastructure side, you could enable GSave compression or broadly compression or things like that. That would help out in terms of site speed. These are very easy and small changes you can do. And then once you kind of cover that up a little bit, you can go and do some more advanced techniques, right? We use code splitting, smart prefetching of your APIs, try to do intelligent caching and things like that. Depends on the use case, and try to kind of not load, if you're on the front end, not load code that is not being used right away. You load it only after when the user actually started interacting with the screen with that specific feature. To finish, I think I want to emphasize the importance of education. Always provide trainings and let people go to conferences about performance, because that's how you kind of get this global buy-in by your engineering department. Always try to document, not only use the documentations out there about the generic optimizations, but try to document the optimizations that you actually work for your specific product, because maybe some other teams would find that useful. And don't forget to celebrate if you have any performance win. So this could be just by a Slack post, just say, good job, and try to celebrate around that. That kind of builds up the momentum. Keep that up while you're going through your performance optimization journey. So yeah, what's next for us is to always try to improve the infrastructure and try to put up, the right tooling to catch up, all these kind of regressions. Not let that happen, especially on our CI/CD pipeline. Try to put up better deployment gates and show that information to developers in a better way to be able to kind of catch any regressions. And also, for product or business teams, try to show performance data along with business data with minimal efforts. So yeah, remember, start small, measure, and show the impact. And performance culture matters. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Malik. So we had a couple questions come in during the talk, and I'd like to remind anyone still on the line, if you'd like to ask Malik any questions about the performance culture of Priceline, just enter them into your Bright Talk questions window. So the first question we had: how does Priceline go about sharing the results of performance initiatives, both with the executive team and throughout the whole organization?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I touched on it a little bit in the slides. We right now, especially on the business side, we try to kind of provide business metrics on every QBR that we're having. we try to use these high-level metrics to kind of make it simple and easy to understand. Like, for example, visual complete is one metric that everyone understands, right? Instead of using something like speed index or something like that. But also, yeah, and if we have any in our like all hands meetings by our CTO meetings and things like that, or like our operations meeting, you know, like maybe once a month, we're trying to go and show like how we're doing in terms of performance.
Cool. Cool. And along those same lines, there's a question. Do you have any strategies for making the data easier to digest so that non-technical people can understand it? So you just mentioned things like visual complete. Is there any other strategies you have for kind of making technical data a little more digestible?
Yeah, try to. I would say you could sense that, right? Like while you're doing your research of the right metric, you can just talk to people around and see how this is being understood, right? It could be just even the engineering teams. You know, sometimes it's hard to understand. That's, you know, a metric that you think is obvious for others, right? It's kind of like you're doing user testing. But yeah, try to pick metrics that actually people can relate to, right?
Right, right. So after an incident, what kind of postmortems do you guys do, and what teams get involved with those?
Yeah, I think this is a great thing. We have actually some kind of front deck and workflow whenever we have a production issue that happens. Usually performance, you know, as it used to be before, sometimes someone raised a performance issue, someone opens a ticket for it, and maybe it gets on the backlog for like 6 months, right? Right now, we're trying to change this approach of considering performance issues as production issues and try to catch that earlier. So since we have like the right alerting in place, if you have an alert about performance, you go and catch that and handle that as if it is a production issue. And then it goes through the normal process of as if it's a production issue. So we have, we'll bring that up. I think every week we have like an operations team meeting. And we just go through these issues and see how much time it took for us, you know, to mitigate, you know, the issue.
All right, great. So last call for questions because we're on our last one otherwise. So the final, is there collaboration on performance between the monitoring teams at Priceline and the marketing teams at Priceline? Because we marketers love putting big high-res images on home pages and things like that.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Yes, so we have our marketing technology teams that actually maintain the websites. We're trying to make them, I think, I don't know, technically part of the engineering department. As any other team, you know, within the performance ambassador group, you know, we have people who are from marketing that come in and, you know, have discussions about what's going on. But also, in the, you know, whenever we do monitoring and we have the right toolings in place, we catch, you know, bugs early on in development. It kind of helps them, you know, reduce the number of regressions.
So we just had one more question come in, actually. How long did it take to transition performance optimization as a side project to a full-time, this person wrote position or initiative, whether or not, whichever one is more applicable to Priceline?
Depends how you want to look at it. I'll probably say maybe years. I kind of moved to the role right now, maybe a year and a half ago, but it's been an ongoing effort in the company. And yeah, you have your ups and downs, right? Now, actually, I think probably the first time, or maybe the second time, to make it more official and have more momentum around it.
And I can attest that Priceline is one of Catchpoint's oldest customers as well. So the performance mindset was there dating back a long time. Certainly before my time at Catchpoint, probably before your time at Priceline.
Now we have the most adoption ever, right, of Catchpoint.
We'd love to hear that. All right. Well, again, Malik, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to everyone who was in attendance and who submitted questions. We will be sending out a recording of this presentation to everyone who registered. So if you missed any part of it, you can catch it there. And look out for more webinars coming up from Catchpoint through the Bright Talk channel and our other channels as well. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks again to Malik, and enjoy the rest of your day.